afternoon, everybody. As I said earlier, this afternoon's proceedings are being broadcast by voice only. There will be no video broadcast. The voice only broadcast will be after a 10-minute delay. Those with mobile devices in the room behind the hearing area may use them to report what they have heard in the hearing room after 10 minutes have elapsed since the event they're describing. They may not be used for recording.
I want to go on now to ask you about the police's response to early efforts by your family to engage with the media. MSS, I'll be directing these questions to you. Why did you feel the need to engage with the media about the police investigation into Michael's death?
Put simply, because what we saw was that the police weren't doing anything or enough. They weren't doing anything. They were also minimising the fact that they had done so little, and we were forced to thinking that we have to start acting ourselves, thinking what can we do as time was passing to get a greater understanding of what happened on that night and to determine the truth of the matter.
Around when did you decide that it was necessary for you to independently go to the media?
I was back in the UK for about a month after the last few days of Mike's life and after he died, and it was in that time that we had conversations with us. The police were coming to talk to us, and it became clear to us that they were more intent in getting sort of information from us. What were we thinking? What were our concerns? What was our fears? Rather than actually giving us information, they should have been supporting us and updating us, but they were just trying to mine us for sort of our position, and we saw nothing happening. And more than that, when we asked them, what about doing an appeal, things we'd seen before as sort of normal citizens, they said, oh no, we'll be inundated with information that it'll put us off, it'll squander resources, it'll take us off track, and it'll be more of a hindrance than a help. And after a while, we thought, this is nonsense. They're not doing anything. We have to take matters into our own hands.
And when you approached the media, what did you want to see happen?
We were in a position where Mike had said something very clearly to the family members, and the police were saying that didn't happen. So we wanted to know the truth. We wanted to say, somebody must have seen something. Was there any information that would help determine exactly what had gone on? And if, as Mike had said clearly so many times that he'd been attacked, to spur the police on to actually start investigating.
And how would you describe the police's response to your efforts to increase public awareness of the attack on Michael through the media?
I mean, to be honest, they looked as if at us as if we were being ridiculous, as if we were kind of almost the sense of, oh, you've watched too many crime dramas. That's a sense of, this is not appropriate. Also, they stated overtly that it wouldn't be helpful, that it would be a hindrance to them, and that we shouldn't do that.
At paragraph 42 of your statement, I'm not going to take you there, you say that the message you received from the police was clear, and in your own words, the message was, be quiet and let us do our job. Is that about right?
100%. It was as if every time we asked a question, every time we suggested anything, they looked at us as if, listen, we're the police, you're not, just let us do our job. And it was a really difficult position to be in, because we kept asking ourselves, is there any possibility that this is true? And it seems incredible that it could be, but we genuinely considered it, and then we looked at everything in front of us and thought, this is becoming a nonsense. This is not the case. I think by that time, Scott had the mantra, I have an open mind, and he kind of used it as if it was a trump card You know, how can you challenge somebody if they're saying they've got an open mind? But we said to him, yeah, I get that. As a police officer, you need to have an open mind. But the person who was attacked and subsequently died has said multiple occasions he was attacked. You know, look at the evidence, look at the distribution of the injury, look at what the people who found them are saying. How can it be appropriate to have an open mind in the face of that sort of information that you've been given, even if you didn't bother to investigate it in a timely manner? But he kept saying, I've got an open mind, that's my job, let us do our job.
Did they ever make you doubt yourself?
Absolutely, 100% they made it. I can't speak for the whole family. They certainly made me doubt myself. And as I've said in the statement, I think it was intentional. I think they intentionally, to be frank, I think they intentionally tried to, divide and rule, pick me off. We're, as I've said, we're quite a large family, different personalities, different human beings. And I think I don't know, perhaps because I was, just had a child, I was also a public servant, maybe they thought that this person will get it. Maybe I was just gullible. I remember throughout those initial weeks and months being completely incredulous that in the face of what was coming up, that they wouldn't investigate, including the fact that when we came home and the Stephen Lawrence inquest outcome came through, I remember actually feeling guilty isn't quite the right word, but as if of course now they're going to investigate, they're going to redouble their efforts, they're going to really prove the narrative wrong. It was clear that there was racial motivation for them not investigating Stephen Lawrence's murder. I just thought there's no human way that they won't think, okay, let's show everyone wrong, let's prove them wrong. And I felt guilty that we were sort of benefiting from the timing, and only to find that actually it was absolutely not the case.
And what did the police tell you would happen if you did criticize them?
As I said before, they said it would impact their motivation. Absolutely. A word they used was, they didn't say we won't do it, but they said, how can you expect people to be motivated when you're criticizing them? And also they said that if we were publicly criticizing the police, then members of the public who had information wouldn't come forward. That if we were showing doubt in the police, it would make the public doubt the police, and then evidence wouldn't be shared. I remember thinking, what a contradiction. On the one hand, you're saying you'll be inundated, and on the other hand, you're saying if we speak up and say what a bad job you've done, then it's going to put people off.
In your statement, you mentioned that the police used the word quality a lot. What do you mean by that?
They kept saying, if you speak up, it's going to affect the quality of the investigation we do. It's going to impact. We said, well, there has been no quality of investigation. And I remember saying that to somebody, and they said, we know the first 12 hours we didn't secure the scene, as if it was just the first 12 hours. But we know it was far longer than that.
Did you feel then, and do you feel now, that the initial police investigation into Michael's death might have been affected by race or any other form of prejudice, for example, his mental health at the time?
I mean, this is such a pivotal question, and I cannot get into somebody's head. But what I can do is look at what I saw in front of me. I saw an immediate emphasis on us as a black family, an immediate parallel drawn by them first, not us first, about the Stephen Lawrence case. This is not another Stephen Lawrence. When we asked them, why is it that you're not investigating this? We heard from, actually, I think it was a member of the press who said that they'd talked about Mike being, a black man, black. Well, you saw the phrase, fucking black schizophrenic was something we later heard. They referred to him in such derogatory ways that it's hard to believe it wasn't racially motivated.
We'll come to deal with the issue of race and defensiveness a little bit later. Now, turning to the family liaison officer specifically, Is it correct at one point one of them pulled you aside and said something along the lines of you needing to manage MWS?
Absolutely. They didn't say the word manage, but they absolutely pulled us aside. The family home at the time, the living room was on the first floor, and the exit was on the ground floor. So I took them down, and they said, "Look, you need to. I can't remember the word, but the sense was manage. You need to get hold of this." It was along the lines of what they said to me: "Why did you let him?" As if I, as the older sibling, should take charge and stop people doing things that they were saying would be an impediment to them. And it was an incredibly difficult, when you say, did I doubt myself? It was an incredibly difficult position to be in, because I didn't want us unintentionally to do things which would hamper the investigation. But, in the way they pulled me aside, like, you're reasonable, that sort of sense was incredibly manipulative. It was only when I spoke to some of my other siblings, I thought, this is absolute manipulation, and we need to stand up against this.
And how did you feel then, and how do you feel now about being asked to effectively go against your brother?
I feel disgusted. I absolutely admit I do feel ashamed, because I wasn't as if instantly I thought, no, this is nonsense. I did weigh it up. I contemplated, could there be any truth to this? Could we be unintentionally impeding things? So I was a real concern, and I just feel that they must have looked at me and thought, she's a soft touch. She's a soft touch. We'll pull her over on our side and we'll get her to promulgate our narrative. And that does not feel good.
Did you ever feel bullied or pressured into complying and accepting what the police told you?
I felt pressurized. I felt pressurized. We felt pressurized. There were times when we said we were doing things like that, they spoke to us in a tone of anger and irritation. I don't use the word bullied lightly, because it's just not part of my habit. But I certainly I felt very pressurized individually, and I think we, as a result of some of the conversations we had, I'd say that many of us felt pressurized by them.
Now, you used the term smokescreen in paragraph 58 of your statement to describe your dealings with the police at this stage. Can you explain what you mean by that?
So much of the time they told us things to suggest that they were investigating, that we shouldn't go to the press because the press weren't interested. They would do it, they would manage it, they would try and get the information, they would ask the public in a way that they felt was most appropriate. But all the time they said that, we found out that very little happened. I actually do believe that they overtly lied to us. If I go back to you were asking MWS about whether police visited the hospital. And when we got home, 16 days after Mike had been attacked, we said to them, why didn't you come to the hospital? They didn't say to us, we were there twice. If they had been there twice, would they not have said that at the time? Why did that was that only suggested later? And where's the evidence that they did? So throughout the time, it was a smokescreen. They were trying to suggest that they were investigating, but what we've since found out was so much energy was being put into, firstly, smearing us, trying to imply that we were hostile, that we had an ulterior motive, etc., that we were ashamed or guilty of that we felt bad that we hadn't looked after Michael enough, that he might have done this to himself. All of these things, they were blowing smoke in multiple directions, trying to minimize what was obvious, that they had done absolutely nothing, and they were more intent on continuing to hide that rather than to actually use the energy to investigate. And I, to this day, can't believe that it wouldn't have been easier for them to investigate it than the fact that they put so much more energy into pretending and hiding.
Was there a point when the family liaison officers stopped meeting with you?
Yeah, I remember, as I said, I've described the arrangement of the house. I remember a few times kind of looking looking out, and they'd kind of walk out and be laughing to each other and joking, or sort of, you know, moving in a way which suggested they were being really liked. And I also remember they'd come into the house and they'd kind of look at us when we were kind of low. They'd sort of come in and say, "Oh, how are you?" And we, not surprisingly, weren't that buoyant. And they'd look at us as if we were, you know, as if we're being melodramatic or something. And I remember saying to them once, when I said, "You always come in and you say how you are in this light voice. And how do you think we are? How do you think we are?" And I remember they just looked at each other. And after that, my memory is that after that, they didn't come very much. And, you know, I can't give you the exact sequence, but I remember thinking, so interesting that when I'm kind of calling them on the way they're behaving with us, they stopped coming. And also, they were often asking me and another of my siblings, you know, so what are you thinking? You know, what are you planning to do? Those sorts of questions. And when we initially, because I'm that kind of person, I just told them. I thought that would help. But over time, when we stopped giving them the responses, then it seemed to coincide with them coming far less often. I went back overseas at about a month, and by the time I'd gone, I don't think they were coming very much at all, but I don't know the exact date sequence.
I want to move on now to another topic. This is the formation of the family campaign, and MWS, I'm going to be asking questions about this to you. In your statement, we don't need to take you there, but for the transcript, it's UCPI 1000-38379 at tab A1, paragraph 37. You state that from a very early stage, we formed the view that the police were letting us down, and without us doing something about it, the investigation into Michael's death would fail. Is that right?
Yes.
When did the idea of forming a family campaign for justice for Michael first arise?
That arose from the investigation not proceeding in a manner which would suggest that it was an investigation. The reports in the media didn't reflect at all what we knew. The actions of the police didn't reflect an investigation. And so we came to the view that we would need to raise awareness, to gain information and collect any remaining available information that was out there. And that was the sole purpose of the campaign, was to draw attention to the events of that night and to make sure that anybody who could assist us would assist us if they saw media reports or had been given a leaflet or seen a radio interview. So we engaged any of the media that we could contact who would assist us, and made all attempts to ask for information. The initial part of the campaign described what we had seen, and the difference between what we are saying and what the police were saying, and asking for information. That was the sole purpose. And also to correct the mistakes that were being propagated by the police in their media activities, and suggesting anything other than that that Michael had been attacked, that there were others that might need to be sought about what had happened, and all of that was counter to what the narrative that the police were giving the media, and the media was subsequently broadcasting.
Was there any political objective in your campaign?
No. The purpose of the campaign was to find out what happened to Michael.
And did your campaign attract political support?
Not that I know of. We spoke to anybody who would listen. But the sole purpose of the campaign was to repeat what was known and to trigger anybody's memory to come forward with any information that they might know.
Did you or anyone else in your family ever receive or set out to receive any payment or endorsements either for or as a result of the campaign? Who was involved in this campaign? You don't have to mention any names, but who were the main parties or involved in the campaign?
The campaign was largely limited to our family and some close friends. We had support from our solicitor, and we met with Suresh Grover, who also gave support, and the monitoring group gave support. Beyond that, I can't see that there's people that I can readily identify.
And what sort of activities did the campaign get involved in pursuing things?
Okay. So I'll describe this campaign that is being talked about. It's really seeking evidence and information. There's not vast amounts of planning or strategizing. It's simply making available members of the family to the media, to the radio, to television, being available when called to ask for information and talk about the family and talk about Michael. But the primary purpose was to ask for information and make sure that the attack on Michael remained in people's minds, so that it would give no opportunity for the police to brush it under the carpet or run the clock on an investigation and try and grind the family down.
Did the campaign ever promote disorderly or violent protest?
Absolutely never.
And did it ever involve itself in any disorderly or violent protest in any other context?
Never.
Now, you've already mentioned that you were supported by the monitoring group, TMG, which was headed by Suresh Grover. Is that right?
That's correct.
How did that connection come about?
I met with him. I examined the work that he's been doing with other families, and determined that it wasn't political, and so that I could guardedly take steps forward and see if we could use their assistance. But more than ever anything, there was caution applied to everybody we met to make sure that we weren't derailed either by design or by accident, and make sure that the request for information and Michael's name was always at the forefront, because everything else was secondary.
Would you say that your family remained in control of the campaign for Michael?
There's nobody else to wrest control from us. We took measures to make sure that we were the campaign. So I can't imagine how what you're describing can come about if we made the decisions and determined what we engaged in and what we didn't engage in.
So can you tell me a little bit more about Mr. Grover's involvement in your campaign? What precisely did he do? He supported you. How did he support you?
We're not able to call demonstrations. We're not able to print leafleting material. We were not able to arrange leafleting in North London. So those kinds of abilities were things that I could work with Suresh with. He introduced us to other families, which also enabled us to put into context what's happening to us in the context of other families, and to see that we're not alone, and to gain energy from that to continue the process of seeking exactly the information that we needed about what happened to Michael, and to make sure that the authorities began to look at it seriously and give it the investigation that anybody ought to expect.
You said you were introduced to other families in similar circumstances. Did you attend any campaigns or events with them?
I attended many meetings, and I spoke at a number of meetings. Spoke to other families, spoke with other families, and saw the similarities with the problems they had, and drew energy from that to continue.
And in your engagement with these other families, did you ever witness or come to learn of any disorder, confrontation, or illegality connected to their campaigns?
I've seen no illegality at all. And
can we have up on screen, please, document 0001643, the tab B3 of your bundle, sir. And it's page 1. This report suggests that the Manson family campaign may have been in some way under the Movement for Justice, or MFJ, banner. MFJ was a separate justice campaign to TMG, but that is a change when Suresh Grover and TMG got involved. What was your involvement, if any, with MFJ?
I don't think I had any involvement with them.
In the first paragraph, it speaks about Suresh Grover and the TMG were keen not to alienate themselves from the Lawrences and the potential financial advantages that the association with the Lawrences might give to their organization. Did Mr. Grover or anyone else from TMG ever ask you for money?
Never.
At the end of the document, the last paragraph, Mr. Grover is reported to describe MFJ as disruptive. Did you witness this in any of the campaigns you attended?
No, never.
Can we take that document down, please? And if we could have up on screen, MPS 0001717. That's at tab B5 of your bundle, sir. Again, page 1. This is a report dated 25th January 1999 concerning a march for Roger Sylvester Did you notice any change in the way that the police dealt with you after the verdict?
They were always defensive, but my aim was to ask questions that brought us towards the information we needed for them to find out and conduct an investigation. Did they change direction? Maybe they were less obvious, but they harbored the same underlying intent, I would say.
Can we show on screen, please? This is a video. UCPI 5038704. This is at tab A31. This is a Channel 4 interview with Mike Bennett, the chair of the MPS Federation, regarding the inquest verdict. It starts at 4 minutes, please.
And with me now in the studio are Mike Bennett, who is chairman of the Metropolitan Police Federation, Michael Menson's sister Essie, and the Menson family solicitor Mark Schwartz. Mike Bennett, first of all, whatever the Metropolitan Police did do, it clearly wasn't enough in this case.
It clearly wasn't enough with hindsight, but at the time the officers felt they acted correctly.
What do you think of the coroner's verdict?
I personally think an open verdict would have been more appropriate. I think you have a problem today where you crowd out in coroner's courts, you virtually intimidate coroner's juries, and you end up with this type of decision. To this day, there is no evidence whatsoever of a murder having been committed.
The expert pathologist that we've just seen there said it is very unlikely that he could have done this to himself, Mr. Menson.
That's his opinion, which would not be evidence in the criminal court. It's the Lawrence inquiry, this inquiry, both lack evidence, and I'm afraid that you would criticise us severely if we took people to court and got them convicted with lack of evidence.
I also find it a little extraordinary that you suggest that the coroner's verdict is not the right verdict, isn't that? I mean, the coroner's court listens to evidence and it comes up, a jury comes up with its conclusion.
Two of the witnesses today mentioned in their evidence things that were not in their statement to police. It took police completely by surprise.
You don't trust juries?
Oh, it's not a question of trusting juries, no. It's the jury found on the evidence given. That was not the same evidence that was given to the police.
So there's certainly something to work with then?
I think the whole thing stinks. I think there's an awful lot to work with. But we are finding as police officers that you can crowd out a coroner's
Well, you made
inquest.
that point, but in the time we have, presumably now the police will reopen this and continue the investigation.
It will always remain open. If evidence comes to light, the people concerned will be charged and convicted. We need the evidence.
Essie Menson, we're talking about your brother. Where do you go from here?
We go from finding the people who did this to our brother. We've known from the outset that he was killed. Now the police need to take this forward and actually find the people who did it and not be clouded by their assumptions, which they've now admitted were wrong.
And we've heard Mr. Bennett say that they will continue with the investigation if they can find the evidence. Is that reassuring?
We need the case not to be forever kept open, but to be solved.
Mr. Schwartz, you're the family's lawyer. Inevitably, because of the Stephen Lawrence case, parallels are being drawn. Does that make it harder for the family to get the justice they're looking for and for the police to do their job?
Perhaps I could just deal with what Mr. Bennett said. He's talking absolute nonsense. He wasn't at the inquest. He wasn't at the summing up. He knows nothing about the case. He's been fed lines by his cohorts. And anyone who's in court during the week would know that what he said is absolutely ridiculous.
Were you not in the coroner's court?
I wasn't in the court, no. But are you telling me that, first of all, one member of the family received a phone call, which they refused to disclose to police to this day? One of the attendants in the ambulance repeated a conversation, which isn't in his statement he gave to police. One of the friends of the deceased person actually gave evidence that the coroner destroyed by saying that the conversation could not have taken place at the date and time when he said it did.
Mr. Bennett would complain.
You know that.
No, let
Mr. Bennett would complain about hearsay. Mr. Bennett is talking hearsay. He's been prompted by third hand by officers who have got their own backs to protect.
I've also spoken
the
to
point is that
newspaper reporters who are in court.
the police themselves have written to us and admitted that they made crucial failures, 4 crucial failures in the first 12 hours of the investigation. It's no doubt that the subsequent police investigation, paltry that it was, had major difficulties because the original police officers, who were under investigation and on the point of retiring, made enormous mistakes. And there's been no apology to the family, there's been a letter of regret, and the police have not adequately explained why they failed in the 3 or 4 days that Michael was conscious in hospital, why they failed to take a statement from him.
That does seem extraordinary, Mr. Bennett, and surely it's not regular procedure in a ghastly incident like this.
I must admit that part of it does seem very extraordinary, but if someone is open to suggestion, if I were to say to a person, did you do this himself? And he'd say yes, and then someone else say, did White Hughes do this? And he would say yes. It makes the whole situation very,
That's
very
not the
difficult.
evidence, though.
This is a terrible case, and these are very sensitized times, so obviously it is important that everybody reacts as well as they can, given what has happened. Now, surely being defensive about the police operation, rather than taking the initiative and saying, well, we do apologize for what we didn't do right, and we will do better, would be a better thing to say.
I couldn't agree more. The bottom line is that we have a lawyer here who would be on the opposing side should we take someone to court, get them convicted on a lack of evidence. We do not have any evidence whatsoever that this man was murdered. You know that, I know that, and you're trying to
wrong.
give the
This was an inquest. This was an inquest. It wasn't
You're
a
trying
criminal...
to deceive people.
I'm explaining what an inquest, what a jury found. You weren't there. They heard all of the evidence. They listened very carefully for a week, and they came to the verdict beyond reasonable doubt that this was an unlawful killing, and you are insulting the family by suggesting otherwise.
We're going to have to leave it there.
You're being dramatic.
We're going to have to leave it there. Thank you all for coming in. The investigation, as you said, does continue. After the...
Thank you. The interview follows a verdict reached by the inquest jury of unlawful killing. Mr. Bennett, speaking on behalf of the police, refused to accept the verdict of the jury. If I may ask you, MSS, how does that feel, listening to that?
When the Racial and Violent Crime Task Force took over the case, they looked at the evidence and they said, as soon as they looked at the evidence, they knew that, firstly, it was a murder, and secondly, they knew who did it. So, for somebody to say that there was no evidence is clearly a blatant lie. And to say things like we crowded out the inquest and to say we intimidated, I mean, that attempt to smear us and to imply very directly that we perverted the course of justice it's worse than outrageous, isn't it?
Can I move on now to ask you about the renewed investigation and the subsequent prosecutions? Following the inquest, the Metropolitan Police issued a statement admitting serious mistakes had been made during the first 12 hours of the investigation. What did you make of this statement? Again, MSS, if I may ask you.
I think that it's just it's one of a pattern of just minimizing what they hadn't done. The fact that that this phrase, the first 12 hours, somebody is found with their back alight, they make statements, they are conscious for that's part of a week. You do nothing at all for the first 16 days, and you keep harking back to that fact that there were some failings in the first 12 hours. It's all minimizing just how inadequate the investigation was, and then thereafter, everything we experience points to that being the focus. Let's protect ourselves. Let's deny what we haven't done. Let's deny how willfully we have chosen to protect ourselves rather than to investigate this crime. And it's obviously it's incredibly hurtful, but it's just shocking. It's shocking that public servants choose that, because this isn't accidental. These weren't sort of words like failings and ineptitude, etc. used, but those all suggest kind of human error, accidental inadequacy. But these were all intentional, and I say that, I don't say that lightly. But if you look at what was done, all those choices were kind of uphill choices. They weren't easy. They actively chose to take a certain line and then stick to it, despite repeated evidence and outcomes, such as the inquest outcomes to the contrary.
On the 25th of September 1998, your solicitor submitted a complaint to the Police Complaints Authority. Is that right?
That's right.
And that resulted in the appointment of the Chief Constable of Cambridgeshire, D.G. Gunn, to investigate the complaints made by your family into the police's handling of the investigation into Michael's death. Is that right?
That's right.
And the eventual outcome of that investigation was the PCA report to which we have been referring. Is that correct?
Correct.
On the 3rd of November 1998, your family was invited for a meeting with the then Home Secretary Jack Straw. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did you attend that meeting?
Yes.
Do you recall the Home Secretary's reaction to what you told him about your efforts to obtain justice for Michael?
Yeah, I remember we told him, actually gave a summary of what we'd experienced, what had happened, what we'd known, what we didn't know, what our intentions were, how we'd been treated, how they tried to vilify us and imply that we were either mad or sad or guilty, that it was, that we were trying to hide our own guilt or whatever. And the words have been used in the report, but he did look visibly shocked. He did look like there was a sense of, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. And what I remember was the kind of the visceral sense that came from his voice, which was of shock.
And the following day, there was another meeting where it was decided that your case was to be transferred to Deputy Assistant Commissioner John Grieve at the newly formed Racial and Violent Crime Task Force. Is that right?
That's right.
Did you attend that meeting as well?
I believe so, yes.
During that meeting, did you notice a shift in the attitude of this team compared to the initial Edmonton investigation team?
Yeah, whether it was at this meeting or another, when we first met with them, there was a sense of that we've been assigned to this case. We're a new team. This is sort of the landmark case, and we're going to take it on. So don't worry, we're here now. And I remember that feeling because we had heard that before. When AMIP took over from the local team in Edmonton, they sort of said, it's okay, this is what we do, we're the professionals, step back because we'll do it all. So there was a bit of a sense of, oh gosh, not again, but also hope, real hope that this team, whose entire raison d'etre was to investigate these cases, was going to be substantive. I also had a sense that maybe there was a possibility that this may be a bit of a trophy case, But to be honest, whilst I had that concern, actually, I was willing to live with that. I was willing to live with that if they kind of said, oh, look, here we are, sort of knights in shining armour, we've solved it. I was willing to live with that if it got to the truth. Because don't forget, by this time, this is 2 years on, okay? So these people who had, found a random person who was in distress and attacked them in such a barbaric way, they were still around. I remember talking to some of my siblings that we really couldn't live with ourselves if they did it again to somebody. And the fact that the police actually didn't give a damn that they were out and still able to harm other people, that wasn't okay with us, and that we couldn't live with ourselves. For Mike, but also for anyone else, because if people can do that, what else can they do? And actually that was borne out, wasn't it? Because when one of them fled to Cyprus, he was wanted for grievous bodily harm. That's how he was first arrested. So I personally was willing to live with it if they took it as a feather for their cap. It wasn't what I'd want, but I'd rather that than the perpetrator not be found.
Did DAC Grieve, when he reviewed the evidence initially, come to a different conclusion than the initial investigation team?
And as I said, he said as I remember of the meeting, he came in, he made a statement, and then he kind of it was almost like, that's it, we're going to go. And we wanted to ask some questions, but he said, look, we've looked through the evidence. I remember he mentioned the Holmes computer, which I didn't know what it was at the time. So I remember that word. We looked through Holmes. Two things we can tell you. It was definitely a murder with a bit of a dramatic pause, and we know who did it. Now, and there was a sense, I can't remember whether he said those words, but there was a sense that kind of now leave us to prove it. And I don't know whether it was at that meeting or later, but there was talk about sort of covert surveillance of the suspects, which is ironic where we are now. But I remember feeling uncomfortable about that because it's not okay to just covertly record people. And I kind of thought, well, risk cost, it's again a risk-benefit analysis. If that's what's needed, and maybe that is what's needed after 2 years, then that's okay.
Arrests were finally made in March 1999, and you already mentioned one person tried to escape to North Cyprus. He was found there and eventually put on trial as well, and they were given sentences, each of them convicted and given sentences of between 10 to 14 years. How do these verdicts and sentences make your family feel?
But would it be okay if I just say something that leads up to that?
Sure.
When they were investigating it, I imagine others in my family felt hopeful, but also actually quite afraid. I talked about, was this a trophy case? I was concerned. Would there be enough evidence? Would this be real? Or were the police so concerned, as they had been up until now, in their own reputation, that, what if this wasn't robust? So, we sat through 2 trials every day, and it was frightening, the very thought of being part of something that, maybe it wasn't solid, but actually, at least having experienced those 2 trials, we heard the evidence that was presented. We didn't crowd out anybody, we didn't influence anybody, and the 2 juries came to the verdicts that they did. And what did it feel like? It felt quite surreal. It felt like, oh my God, we could have given up at any time. It was so hard. So hard, we could have given up and we couldn't. And a lot of that, the reason we persevered was because MWS, even though he was being personally attacked more than any of us by the police, he stood steadfast. He'd heard Mike say what he'd said. And I kept thinking, God, what if we'd given up? What if we hadn't given up? And then down the line, we'd heard of some other person being killed or attacked.
Would you like me to take a break? I think that'd be a good idea. I'll write for 10 minutes. ready to continue?
Please, thank you.
I'd like to move on now to the issue of surveillance. If I may ask you, MWS, when did you first become aware that your family and your campaign for justice for Michael had been subject to covert monitoring by the police?
It was mentioned in the trial at the Old Bailey.
Do you remember when that was, approximately?
In the December of 99, yeah.
How did you react when you found out that you and your family were being spied on by an undercover officer?
I felt less than human. I felt violated. I felt disbelief that these kinds of actions are being taken against us when we were only seeking to find out what happened to Michael.
Did they give you an explanation as to why they were spying on you?
There's words of, I don't know, what's it? Collateral intrusion, whatever that may mean. We asked only questions about Michael. That was our intent from the beginning to the end of our campaign.
Could we have up on screen, please, document MPS 0748390. That's a tab B4 of your bundle, sir. This is a special branch note concerning left-wing activities in relation to the Stephen Lawrence inquiry. Now, it focuses on MFJ with reference to the Lawrence campaign. It also refers to Michael's case and that of others, such as the Reels family. I want to direct your attention to the handwritten comments on page 1. They're difficult to make out, but what it reads is Commander SB, special branch. For information, you may wish to show this to ACJO. Upon return, I shall arrange for Mr. Grieve to be briefed. Now, this comment appears to be attributed to Colin Black, another senior officer. And it appears from the date of this document, which you can see up in the top left-hand corner, that in late 1998, early 1999, DAC Grieve was briefed on intelligence reports from Special Branch about Michael's case. And it follows that he was likely briefed on undercover police reports, although the reports don't confirm this explicitly. This was happening at a time when DAC Grieve and his team were reinvestigating Michael's death in the lead up to the prosecutions and convictions later that year in 1999. May I ask you, MSS, how does it make you feel that at the point where you thought you were finally being taken seriously by the police, it was seemingly the case that they were at the same time spying, or at the very least had knowledge of spying by undercover officers on your family?
That sense of disbelief of just how intentional it was, yes, to swan in, to sweep in and say, we know it was murder, we know it was who it was, but to conceal this was an accidental omission. This was, I've used the word manipulation so many times, but I can't understand how this is anything but other than an intentional. Let's tell you the things that will keep you on side, that will make you think that we're the superheroes, but we'll conceal really important information. And what if the trial hadn't led to convictions? What if this stuff had got in the way of finding justice? They risked so much, and this sense of, you asked me, did I doubt myself? This constantly being given reason to doubt what we were thinking, what we were being told, what we were believing, to find that even this team, CO24, were sort of in cahoots with the SDS, and rather than distancing themselves from it, it's just really shocking. And I cannot understand how people of this seniority think that's okay.
Did you ever learn from anyone which officers or units were involved in that surveillance? For example, did you ever come across an officer known by his cover name, David Hagan, or HN81?
No, I didn't.
What about HN43, Peter Francis?
They're not names that are familiar to me.
Right. Could we take that document down, please, and put up UCPI 50-38571. That's a tab 4, sir. This is an extract from pages 369 to 370 of the PCA report. If we go to page 1, paragraph 4, I'm not going to read the full extract, but want to mention one particular question which your lawyer, Mr. Schwartz, asked the police, which was whether there were any suspects in the investigation. The reply from the senior officer attending the meeting, and this was a meeting which was held on the 19th of March 1997, was that there are no suspects because this presupposes a criminal act. If we go down to page 2, please, paragraph 1, the officer goes on to state that there had been a number of reviews into the investigation into Mike's death, and that he was satisfied with the manner of the investigation. We go on to the next paragraph, please, paragraph 2. Following that meeting, a letter dated 27th of March 1997 was sent from your lawyer to senior officers at Edmonton Police Station, raising further questions and concerns about the investigation. The next paragraph. On 14th of April 1997, the police sent a response, and notably further reference was again made in that letter to it being unclear whether Michael's death was caused by a criminal act, by accident, or by himself. If we could go to page 2, paragraph 6, please. On 27th of March 1997, a briefing note about Michael's death was prepared for Assistant Commissioner Dunn, which contained a reference to the family as follows. It said, their current attitude is now one of open hostility. Could we go to page 3, paragraph 2, please? On the same day, this remark of open hostility was submitted to the Assistant Commissioner, which, with or as part of a briefing note, a message was entered on Holmes, which is the police internal database, which noted that Detective Superintendent Duffy has suggested that special branch checks should be completed on all the Manson family prior to further interviews with them. MWS, did you attend the meeting on 19th of March 1997?
I believe so, yes.
And can you recall what the attitude of the police toward the family was during that meeting?
They were always, they were always at odds with what we said, and disbelieving and dismissing our attempts to find out what was happened.
Why do you think they put your family under surveillance?
This was a scheme to collect anything that can diminish us as a campaign and a family, and find any information that they can use to discredit us and use to shut down the family campaign by whatever means that they could find. That's the conclusion I draw from that.
Could we take that document down, please, and put up UCPI 50-39419? There's a tab A20 of your bundle, sir. And if we go to page 3, paragraph 3, this is another extract from the final PCA report. It follows the remark about the family of open hostility that was submitted to the Assistant Commissioner with or as part of a briefing note. We just discussed this above, and that led to the special branch checks on the family. page 3, paragraph 3 sets out the PCA report's comments on this. It says, an inference which could be drawn from that proposed line of inquiry is that the family of a murder victim were having security checks carried out on them with Special Branch to see if they had any involvement in extremist politics. It is unclear precisely why such checks were made, but the description of the family as hostile may have inferred that such behavior had some political motivation. We know from the PCA report as well that DCS Duffy was interviewed by the Cambridgeshire inquiry, and while he could not recall any criticism or suggestion that the Menson family were involved in extreme political activity, he nonetheless did agree and authorize the Special Branch inquiry. I'm not going to pull that up, but for reference, that document for the transcript is UCPI 5038692, and that's tab 19 of your bundle, sir. MSS, would you describe yourself or your family as politically extremist?
Well, absolutely not. And this has nothing to do with the case at hand. It was a diversion. We aren't, we never have been. You know, what if we had been a family with a history in instruction? It still would have been completely irrelevant. And what their duty was to investigate the crime or whatever they thought had happened, to find that out. And instead, they were focusing energy and time and resources on this.
I'd like to say that
Yes.
I'm looking at this word hostile in inverted commas, and this is the precursor of how you dismiss somebody who is in a position. You demonize them, and then you begin to lay the foundation and the suggestions that they are hostile and unworthy and difficult to work with, and should be seen as that by anybody reading this material. And this is part of a campaign that I say is a racist attempt to contain us, minimize us, damage us by whatever means in order to preserve their position and make the police look to cover their tracks on their failings from the outset of this investigation. So it doesn't surprise me that the word hostile is here. I ask questions at every meeting. It was my only function. So to put me as hostile, it describes that they simply aren't able to understand the problem that was in front of them and begin to work and find Michael's killers. And instead, they diverted their energy into preserving their reputation, covering their tracks, and diverting anybody who was seeking the truth away from what happened and the family.
Can we take that down, that document down, please? And can we put up UCPI 5038700? That's A27 in your bundle, sir. Please go to page 3 and the final paragraph on page 3, which just goes on to page 4. The PCR report makes the following conclusion. It says, the evidence indicates that the culture, which served as a sense-making and control mechanism for the police officers dealing with the Menson case, was one which sadly displayed the characteristics of institutional racism. If we go on to page 4, please, second paragraph. The shared belief system was evident in documents such as the draft report to the Home Office after the inquest, and the failure of senior officers to challenge the views expressed. There was an absence of the control mechanism that should have acted to check and challenge the mindset and or behavior of individual officers. The organizational culture meant that essential critical questions were never asked, misrepresentations were perpetuated, and initial failures were compounded rather than corrected. In this case, it is judged that the initial racist stereotyping led inexorably to institutional discrimination. Do you believe, MWS, that racism may have had a contributory impact on the failure by police to conduct a proper investigation into Michael's death from the start?
Yes, it is an ever-present feature.
Can we go to page 8, please, paragraph 2? This is also part of the PCR report. The defensiveness is explicit in the statement recorded in DAC Townsend's file that the decision by the senior management team not to investigate was because any inquiries into the team's actions could uncover areas of concern. At a later point, Townsend is recorded as saying that it would be potentially difficult to unpick this inquiry because we know there would be similarities with Lawrence. What would it have looked like to a jury at the inquest? And the final paragraph of page 8, please. In his interview with the Cambridgeshire team for the PCA report, Townsend acknowledges awareness of emerging issues in the Stephen Lawrence inquiry. But the response was not to attempt to improve the service to another black family, more to protect the police. They quote Townsend as stating the inquest would be viewed as another Lawrence. A black man died, nobody done anything about it for 16 days. It would have been a major blow for the Metropolitan Police. If we could go to page 9, please, first paragraph. The lack of respect for the Menson family is evident in Officer Townsend's view that he had responsibility to put the Metropolitan Police in the best possible light for the inquest. Townsend said, I had a responsibility to the press and trying to find out where we were vulnerable, and to a certain extent where the Menson family had not been helpful in trying to get some balance. The PCA report remarks that this comes very close to saying that there was a wish to discredit the family in order to protect the police from criticism. Do you agree with this assessment?
I do.
Can we go to page 12, please? Second paragraph at the bottom. The PCA report reaches another conclusion. In coming to a conclusion on these difficult issues, the analysis of race as a factor in the police investigation into the death of Michael Menson supports the allegations of the Menson family in a number of respects. Contrary to the declarations of many of the officers, race can be shown to have been a significant influence on the behavior of the police. Could we take down that document, please, and put up UCPI 5038745. It's a tab 38. And if we go to the bottom half of page 18, please. The document sets out a quote attributed to a police officer about Michael that was recorded on page 446 of the PCA report. This comment was recorded as second-hand information, but there was found to be no reason to not believe it was made. And the statement attributed to the officer was this: why are you all making all the fuss? He's only a fucking black schizophrenic. That statement, if accurate, seemingly came from a serving police officer at the time. How does that make you feel?
Disgusted. And dehumanized.
And yeah, this is somebody who was killed, attacked in a horrendous way. And for anyone to, any human being to feel that that's appropriate language to use about somebody it's just beyond belief. I
want to go on now to speak a little bit about a term that the police used what's called collateral intrusion. You've already mentioned it, but I want to ask a few more questions about it. In MWS's statement at paragraph 70, I'm not going to take you there, I'll just read it out. He says, one of the most concerning aspects of SDS operations, as revealed by both the Ellison and Hearn reports, was the scale and nature of collateral intrusion. That is, the routine gathering of private, often deeply personal information about individuals who were not suspected of any wrongdoing. This indiscriminate approach meant that campaigners, their families, and even bystanders could find themselves under unwarranted scrutiny with little regard for their right to privacy. On top of the obvious grief and trauma that you were dealing with at the time, how did the discovery that your family were being spied on feel to you then, and how does it feel to you now?
Unlike MWS, I don't remember it from the trial, but I remember when I learnt about it just being just utterly shocked. It felt like a gut punch after everything that we had experienced to find that sort of absolutely flimsy kind of rationale or no rationale was given to spying on us at a time when we were clearly at our most vulnerable.
Do you think your family falls under the category of collateral intrusion?
Well, firstly, it wasn't collateral because it was targeted and intentional. There was nothing collateral about what I've seen. But secondly, that isn't okay. The links between us and any political groups were so tenuous that there isn't a rationale that holds water to me, so I cannot accept any sense of collateral intrusion at all. And even if there were appropriate links, that isn't okay. If people are going to undertake undercover surveillance, there has to be a robust system to justify that it's warranted, and that it's relevant, that it's necessary, and that there aren't any other routes, and that none of those existed for us. So to exploit our vulnerability and to try and find, fish for anything they can use against us is inhumane.
Would you accept generally that it is necessary for undercover police work to infiltrate groups that they perceive might provoke or instigate violence or public order?
For the public good, they are public servants. It's their duty to keep the public safe.
And if I were to ask you today, would you trust the NPS to undertake such undercover work within reasonable and legitimate boundaries?
Well, there's nothing in what we've seen that would suggest that.
There's no checks and balances. They run wild and do as they choose, when they choose, where they choose. So who would have any confidence in a system such as that?
I'm now going to go into my last section, which is the impact this has had on you, both personally and as a family. Looking back, do you feel that the later convictions for Michael's murder and the PCA report's findings vindicated the family's campaign?
We only sought answers. That's all. The beginning, the middle, and the end was all to find out what happened to Michael. He said to us that he'd been attacked in a street, and we had to draw all the resources we had amongst ourselves to honour his name and find out what happened.
Has the discovery of surveillance changed your view of policing or the state's treatment of bereaved families seeking justice?
I think the bereaved families are extremely vulnerable, and they're ripe targets and remain so for things that they could not even imagine in their worst nightmares. And this is a facet of that I surmise was present then and is present now. I've seen no indication to see that that this behaviour, which was reported up the chain, how far up the chain, we don't know, but it's been sanctioned and approved and reported back. So what saves me today? What acts in my behalf today? If it's decided that I might still be collateral intrusion subject, that what considerations are made to go ahead today and undertake these actions? I guess the answer is none.
Can you tell me what has been the longer term emotional and psychological impact on yourselves and your family, again without mentioning any names, of learning that you were spied on?
It sickens us. It makes you ask, why weren't we protected? What reviews, what authorizations were given? Where are the reports and where are the authorizations? This didn't happen by accident, by chance. I say that the spying was a systematic scheme simply to protect their interests and had no account for us, and we were treated not even as human beings.
What do you now hope that this inquiry will achieve in relation to the monitoring and infiltration of the Campaign for Justice for Michael?
We need to know why. We need to know where. We need to know when. Who authorized it? The chain of command that reviewed it. What level of within the police, and who knew? Who agreed it? Who was happy to read those reports? And who didn't question?
You received, I believe, both of you, but I'll address MSS on this. You received a letter from the Deputy Assistant Commissioner, on its surface, an apology letter. Is that correct?
That's correct, on the surface.
And could I have that letter up, please? It's UCPI 50394438, and if I could have alongside it UCPI 50394435. These are two letters. You will see that they are both dated 31st of October 2025. They are both from John Saville, the Deputy City Commissioner, and they are both identical in content. One is addressed to UMSS. The other is addressed to Mrs. Sukhdev Reel, who also lost her son in tragic circumstances. Seeing these two letters side by side and knowing that you both received exactly the same letter, how does that make you feel?
It's what a copy and paste job to send to us. 31st of October, why send an apology now, in the middle of the inquiry? Where in the apology does it say what they are apologising for? Where in the apology does it actually give any sense of the scale of this? The who, when, why? We know that documents were destroyed. There's a vast amount that we know, or we know we don't know, that isn't referred to this. So this is a real sort of, I'm sorry you feel that way apology, which is worse than apology. It makes absolutely no sense to send it now.
Sorry, can I take you to the second last paragraph, the final sentence? It says it was considered premature to issue a full and personal apology at this stage.
Well, it's not a personal apology because it's copied and pasted from Mrs. Reel's. it's premature, so why send it? It's actually quite insulting to think in the middle of the inquiry, oh, let's send something that's a generic cut and paste to some of the victims to see if what was the purpose? It makes absolutely no sense.
The last sentence reads, "We remain fully committed to engaging with you once the full body of evidence has been heard to ensure that any apology offered by the MPS is comprehensive, meaningful, and reflective of the truth." What do you make of that sentence?
Again, why send it on the 31st of October? And what evidence is there? Why are you letting people not give evidence, people who should be called to account not give evidence? You know, and as I understand it, the reasoning is that is post-traumatic stress disorder. Do they not imagine we have post-traumatic stress from this whole experience that's gone on for nearly 29 years? So we are fully committed. How many empty words have we heard over those 29 years? You're fully committed once the full body of evidence has been heard. And we know so much has been destroyed. So what does any of that mean? I mean, that's worse than insulting it. It felt like adding insult to injury, thinking that kind of shoddy copy and paste supposed apology could have any beneficial effect. It's actually had a detrimental effect, and it's harmful, and I think they should be absolutely ashamed of themselves.
Finally, I would like to ask both of you if there's anything you wish to add on the impact all of this has had on you personally. MSS, may I start with you? Is there anything you wish to add?
You asked MWS some questions about impact, and I've just jotted down, as we've been speaking, some of the things that are relevant. I think the first thing to say, which you may have a sense of, is that we are grateful for the invitation to appear at this inquiry, but it was not an easy decision to make at all, and we almost didn't, but the reason we are here is because we felt we had a really strong moral imperative to do so, to be willing to go through all of this again. So many of those things that we've seen, we've heard before, but to have to read it again, to hear those words, to hear the willfulness of what was done. We're not here for catharsis, we're not here for retribution, we're here because how many times do we have to hear, oh, okay, we did wrong, we're going to change, there are going to be learnings, and to see that not happen. 29 years is a long time to have that happen again and again and again. And we have, and I say this very respectfully, we have put our faith in you to make sure that our time, our efforts, our energy, the challenges we faced in being here aren't wasted, that they're not, it's not another thing for which the cost is going to be greater than the benefit. We had to endure the reality and the awfulness of the attack on Mike and lose him in that way, and that was unthinkable. But it's so many steps, so many steps along the way have been salt in that wound, and it's hard to actually believe it, let alone know whether that the enormity of that is come across. We have to live with the fact that there were multiple intentional, willful misinvestigations. And as I've said, I'm not in the heads of people, but what we see in front of us is strong evidence that the misinvestigations were willful. On top of that, we were willfully discredited and smeared. Hostile, not just hostile, but obstructive words in important reports to key people at key times which will have influenced how they thought of us. How can you not think of a family in one way if they're described as hostile and obstructive compared to a family who are perhaps described as grieving or distressed or confused or wanting answers, wanting to understand? Completely different. And that was intentionally done. We were also, I believe very firmly that we were manipulated. I particularly was sort of picked out, that there was a sense of let's divide and rule and let's try and split them up, let's try and influence the narrative they have within them. And they looked for cracks within us as a family and tried to exploit that. And that's really hard to live with. As I said earlier, it took huge strength to persevere, and I actually don't give myself any of that credit, because I doubted a lot of the time whether we were doing the right thing. And that's really hard to live with. And at the end, you use the word vindication. Vindication brings a sense of, oh, great. But there was no, oh, great at all. It was the exact opposite. I also want to highlight the manipulation by language. Language really matters. I've talked about hostile, I've talked about obstructive, but there's all sorts of language like, flaws, failings, inept, inadequate. Those imply sort of accidental, incompetent, sort of normal human failings of a public servant. That's not what was seen here. There's more than enough evidence to show that these were intentional, willful lies that were told, that for which people have not been held and brought to account. And there was active measures to conceal that, to put far more important than either Michael's murder or what the family were going through. It was far more important to focus on the police's reputation, to try and rescue that from the gutter where it was because of their own actions. And they actually had an opportunity to say, look, we've done really badly to now, we will do better. With Mike's case, with other cases, they had opportunities to redeem themselves. So to intentionally choose not to do that, that's what's dehumanizing. We matter so little that we're not going to take the opportunities to redeem ourselves. We are so against you for who you are, based on the colour of your skin, that we're going to intentionally use these opportunities to fail you, rather than, even if you are self-interested in, as a police force, to protect ourselves or to redeem our reputation. The covert surveillance then it's hard to describe how painful that has been and is. And we talk about trauma, we talk about re-traumatization, but actually when you find that you've been through all of that and then been subject to surveillance, it affects who you are to the core and how you engage with the world, how you engage with things around you, the fears, which are often irrational or definitely not what you want to experience. I experience real fears around my work, around what if I made an honest mistake? Would that suddenly be dragged up and I would be pilloried and criticised, as has happened in other cases? Were the police so intent on painting us as kind of evil, malevolent beings that they could do that? I found it hard to do the job that I was trained to do beyond finding out about the intrusion, thinking, what about some of my patients? I looked after patients who were very sensitive in their diagnosis. Would that be brought up? Would other people suffer because the police, that Metropolitan Police Service, was so intent in trying to find things to use against us? And my decision was to do everything in my human power to not let what I'd experienced to destroy me. Having personal therapy for an extended period of time, really trying to come to terms with what was done, but still retain my belief in humanity, and that people are good, that there is common humanity, and that's what one should expect, and that's what I'm intent in preserving in myself. I worked in a field where I know conflicts happen, where people have different perspectives, and what struck me in that was just how damaging it is when disagreements or different perspectives clash and become conflict, how destructive that is to everybody. It's coloured what I do now, what the work I do, what helping people come together when they have different perspectives to try and minimise the absolute destructive damage of negative, destructive conflict, and help people come together, uncover what is beneath the surface. Ask those why questions. Why is somebody doing this? Why is that behaviour happening? Because quite often you can uncover that there isn't a malevolent intention. Despite having done that, that's been my focus probably for the last 10 years of my life. I still have not been given any opportunity to find any peace in what was done to us. And whilst day by day I work with families, teams to try and help them find some peace, find comfort, find actually shared common humanity when there's disagreement. I can't see any way where we're getting this, and I hope that the inquiry somehow is able to get to the truth beneath some of the things that we know have happened to us, to help us get to a place of understanding. Because one of the biggest pains that people can have is not understanding why we as normal, quiet, publicly minded, lawful people were treated in this way. The costs to us individually and as a family has been huge. I'm not going to go into the detail of that because other family members haven't been able to withstand this. But it's important to know that we have partners, families, children, the time that we've spent in all of this, the impact of having to go back on this again, and that impacts us. It changes, it affects who you are as a person, how you engage with people that you care for or love or are with, and that isn't okay. That is absolutely not okay. So, to find ourselves in another inquiry, it's hard. It's really very, very difficult. And as I said, I hope that I say this because it's really important that this inquiry isn't another empty exercise, that even though records have been destroyed, even though people are allowed to say, I've got post-traumatic stress, I'm not going to give evidence, that's not allowed to end there. There has to be a way of ensuring that public serving organisations learn. Nobody's perfect, but there's a difference between being imperfect and willfully being harmful. And we have been harmed, many, many other families have been harmed, and that has to stop. And the only reason I am here, MWS here, and I suspect other families are here because we are determined that other people do not go through what we've been through for the last nearly 30 years. We worked really hard and we were really cautious about being on any sort of bandwagon, being in any sort of political sort of hue, joining any bandwagons. I felt a lot of guilt that I didn't go to the Lawrence inquiries because I felt, well, maybe I should have. Why was I being so active when it affected me when I hadn't supported them? So we worked really hard not to be affiliated with anything that could be political, yet we still found ourselves subject to this sort of behaviour. So I really ask you, really from the bottom of my heart, please make this count. Let's all of us leave this knowing that we've made a difference. And actually, no one is perfect. No one is perfect. But if people do wrong, rather than thinking, how can I cover my backside? It's okay, what do we need to do to make sure that this doesn't happen again? And I really ask you to do that.
There is now a process under which, if there are any questions that people wish counsel to the inquiry to put to you, they're put to him. He considers whether he should do so, and if he thinks it right, he will ask them of you. Your own counsel may also wish to re-examine you. But for both of those things to occur, I must break again for another 15 minutes. Before there are any further questions, MWS, is there anything you would like to say in conclusion? Now would be your opportunity to do so, if you do wish to do it.
Thank you very much. I'd just like to say that the undercover police spying on my family has a lasting effect to this day. I question people I meet. What are their intentions? Are they reporting back? And that colours every facet of your life. We were subject to these spying simply because we asked questions. We were failed from the minute Michael was attacked. We were failed again when they failed to come and speak to him himself. We were failed through their initial investigations, or lack of. They took measures to smear us, divert the media and press away, trying to convince us that talking to the media wasn't the right thing to do. Too much information, too many leads. We have enough leads to go on. All of this was designed to simply repair their reputation, to contain the damage and repair their reputation. They had no care for Michael, no care to find out what happened to him, and certainly no care for my family. We were simply an obstacle that they needed to deal with. The questions are always, who sanctioned this? Who agreed this? Who read the reports? Where did the reports go? And who had Michael's interest? Who had my interest? Who had my family's interest in all of this? We're talking about spying on people who have done no wrong, asking questions. And yet it's become a routine, not even a surprise within that organisation. It wasn't accidental. It was a calculated scheme without paper trail as far as they could manage. Verbal meetings in corridors and where have you. Destroyed documents. And this is an organisation that serves me, a black man. And yet every day we'll interact with everybody, including police. So where do you stand in all of this? You've got to live a life. But there's no guides. And at every turn you're vulnerable. It makes no sense that this spying was allowed to happen. And it makes me fearful that without change, it'll become a day-to-day occurrence. And families like mine, seeking justice, seeking answers, are trodden over and ground into the dirt. Thank you.
Thank you. Just one or two questions on a very brief topic from me. MSS, MWS, you've already been asked a number of questions about the findings of the PCA report. You've already been asked about the robust findings that report made on the issue of racism. We don't need to go to it, but just for the record, in its conclusion on that issue, the report found that direct racial discrimination could be inferred from the facts, and one of the reasons for that was the racial stereotyping of members of Michael's family as hostile, anti-police, and even unreliable liars, in inverted commas. If we can then just turn to another part of that report, this is Exhibit 24, UCPI 50038699. Just pull up the second and third paragraph of that report. This is another reference that the report makes to the request for special branch checks on the family. We've already heard a bit about that, but the report specifically says, sadly, the institutionalisation of the negative stereotype of the family also resulted in the instruction from Detective Chief Superintendent Duffy, relayed to the office manager by a redacted DI, that SO12 or special branch checks be completed on all the Menson family prior to further interviews with them. Please ensure checks completed at SO12 are a possible activist involvement of the Menson family. Given the reference there to the negative stereotyping of the family as an explanation for the request for special branch checks and the other findings of the report, do you have any concern that there was racism at play in that specific request made for special branch checks into your family?
I mean, I can go first. Absolutely. Otherwise, there was no reason. There was no reason, absolutely no reason to carry out any checks on us. Absolutely none. You know, we weren't there when there was no reason. So the only reason that we can infer is our race and the way they viewed us. You had to work really hard to view us in that way, because that's not how we were behaving. So it was intentional, and I think, as I said, about the manipulation of the facts, the words that were chosen to paint us in a certain light so that this seemed like a reasonable next step. It wasn't accidental. It was very intentional and very different from the picture that if you'd come into our home, that's not what you'd have seen. Do you want to add to that?
Yeah, the racism there was designed and used to limit the examination within the organisation. It gave an excuse to short-circuit any of the protections that should be in place to protect me and my family. It demonised us so that we could be dismissed and that they could confidently protect their reputation and organisation.
And leading on from that, when we turn to the interests of the SDS in your family and the surveillance of you by that unit, do you have any concerns in relation to any racist motivations for that?
I say it's deeply racist. They simply viewed us as unworthy and as unhuman, and that enabled them to conduct their spying with impunity and with confidence.
I would just add that it's like sediment, like layer upon layer upon layer. The way they described us, the way they said we were hostile, that we were obstructive, that we were crowding out legal processes. All of those things were building up a picture, so that by the time Grieve was involved and liaising with them, they had created a narrative that we firstly were partly ignorant to, but informed what they did and allowed them to think that this was okay. And at no point, as NWS has said, at no point did they question, did they say, why are we doing this? What is this based on? And senior people must have seen that and bought into the spin that had been built over the preceding years on us. People who just wanted to ask respectfully reasonable questions, but they decided to distort the narrative, so it made us look like we were dangerous and that we were a risk. And you didn't have to scratch very far, the surface very far to see that that was not the case.
Thank you. No further questions from me.
Any re-examination?
No further questions.
Thank you for undertaking the difficult task, both of you, of giving oral evidence to me. It has made clear to me, in a way, that seeing even the rather dramatic things that are said on paper can't bring fully to life. And that is what Sir William McPherson and his panel spoke of when they identified institutional racism. As I say, you have brought that to life in a manner that can only be done by speaking, you speaking, and me listening. I'm deeply grateful to you for doing so. I leave with the hope which you've expressed that common humanity will eventually prevail. I think it generally does. Nobody can get rid of all the bad things in the world, but on the whole we survive, and we survive because, as you've rightly observed, common humanity makes us. Thank you.